On the afternoon of the 1st of November 1967, an ordinary school day in Dundee, Scotland was torn apart by an act of calculated cruelty and violence. The gunman who walked into St John's Roman Catholic High School that day would become one of Scotland's most notorious killers. Robert Mone, a disillusioned and disturbed 19-year-old soldier, forever altered the lives of a group of schoolgirls, the family of a beloved teacher, and a nation that would be forced to reckon with the consequences of his crimes for decades to come. But out of the violence of that day came a remarkable act of selflessness. Nanette Hansen, a young teacher who had moved from Yorkshire to Dundee just months earlier, stood between Mone and her students. Her quiet courage saved 12 young girls' lives. Hansen would posthumously be awarded the Albert Medal for her bravery. Mone, meanwhile, would go on to commit further atrocities after escaping from a high-security psychiatric hospital, leaving a trail of blood and trauma that reverberates to this day. Robert Francis Mone was born in 1948 in Dundee, Scotland. He grew up in a working-class home with his parents and 2 siblings. In later years, Mone would claim that his childhood had been marked by dysfunction and trauma, though details of that period remain fragmented. He was expelled from St John's Roman Catholic High School in 1964 after clashing with the Marist brothers who ran the school. This expulsion would become a key part of his sense of grievance and the supposed revenge motive behind his later attack. Seeking a way out of Dundee, Mone joined the Gordon Highlanders in 1966 and served in West Germany. His military career was short and troubled. He returned to Scotland suffering from depression and drinking heavily. Former comrades described him as volatile, unpredictable, and increasingly withdrawn. His resentment towards his former school and teachers festered over the following months. On the morning of November 1st, 1967, Mone, dressed in his Gordon Highlanders uniform, armed himself with a shotgun and a supply of cartridges and walked toward St John's School. He carried the weapon wrapped in paper, making it appear at first as though he held an ordinary parcel. He was 19 years old at the time. Nanette Hansen, aged 26, was teaching a needlework class of 12 girls between the ages of 14 and 15 years old. She was originally from Bradford in Yorkshire and had moved to Dundee earlier that year with her husband, Guy. She was pregnant at the time with their first child. By all accounts, she was one of the most popular teachers at the school, warm, patient, and loved by her students. Mone entered the classroom abruptly and ordered the pupils to barricade the doors. He forced them into a small fitting room and began firing shots into the door and windows to deter anyone from intervening. Outside, police and staff gathered helplessly, unable to storm the room without risking the lives of the students inside. For the next 90 minutes, Hansen engaged Mone in calm conversation. She tried to keep him talking, to humanise herself and the girls, and to keep the situation from descending further into violence. She also worked to protect the girls physically and emotionally, trying to shield them from his escalating threats. During this period, however, Mone sexually assaulted 2 of the girls, raping one and assaulting another at gunpoint. One attempted shot at Hansen misfired. Mone asked for 18-year-old nurse Marion Young, whom he had met once before and claimed understood him. Young bravely entered the classroom in an effort to negotiate with Robert. Together, she and Hansen persuaded him to release the 12 girls. Hansen insisted that he take her as a hostage instead, prioritizing the safety of her pupils. As the girls fled to safety down the stairs, Mone turned his gun on Hansen. Telling her to turn around because he couldn't face her, he shot her in the back at point-blank range. She was rushed to hospital but sadly died of her injuries, her unborn child dying with her. The aftermath of Hansen's death was marked by grief, shock, and an outpouring of admiration for her bravery. The headmaster of the school, Brother Bede, called her a heroine, a martyr who died for those children. Her parents, George and Mary Hall, travelled from Yorkshire to Dundee to collect her body. Hundreds attended her funeral at St John's Church in Ben Riding, Yorkshire. She had been married for only 6 months. Hansen was posthumously awarded the Albert Medal for life-saving, one of the United Kingdom's highest honours for civilian bravery at the time. Her citation described how, despite being directly threatened, she calmly engaged the gunmen, secured the release of her students, and gave her life in the process. She was also awarded the Sir James Duncan Medal in 1968 for outstanding bravery in assisting police. In 1971, the Albert Medal was replaced by the George Cross for living recipients, but Hansen's posthumous award remains an Albert Medal. In 2000, she was honoured in her hometown of Bradford, alongside other George Cross and Victoria Cross recipients, and to this day, St John's School holds a memorial mass for Nanette each year on November the 1st. Robert Mone was arrested without further violence. His demeanour was reported as disturbingly calm when police entered the room. His subsequent psychiatric evaluation found him to be suffering from severe schizophrenia. In January of 1968, he was declared unfit to plead and was found legally insane. Rather than face a conventional trial, he was detained indefinitely at State Hospital in Carstairs, Scotland's high-security psychiatric facility often referred to as Colditz for its inescapable reputation. This legal outcome was controversial even at the time. The public struggled to reconcile the cold-blooded nature of his actions with the legal determination of insanity. Many believed that justice had not been served in this case. Others accepted the medical evidence that Mone's mental illness was severe and required secure treatment rather than a conventional prison sentence. While Mone was detained at Carstairs, another violent man was on a similar path. In 1970, Thomas McCulloch committed a shocking attack at the Erskine Bridge Hotel in Renfrewshire. After a dispute over something as trivial as butter for a bread roll, McCulloch shot a chef in the face and wounded the manageress. His victims survived, but psychiatrists determined that McCulloch was psychopathic and dangerous. Like Mone, he was also sent to Carstairs. McCulloch presented himself as a model patient, working in the paint shop and appearing cooperative. In reality, he was biding his time. Over the following years, he and Mone developed a close relationship, one that some reports later described as romantic, and began plotting an escape. For 6 months, they planned meticulously, gathering weapons, disguises, and false documentation. On the night of November 30th, 1976, Mone and McCulloch put their plan into action. They had smuggled axes, knives, garrotes, nurses' uniforms, and forged IDs. They targeted nursing officer Neil McClellan and patient Ian Simpson. Paint stripper was thrown at their faces as the attackers hacked at them with axes and knives. McCulloch killed McClellan with sustained blows. Mone speared Simpson with a pitchfork. In a grotesque act of triumph, McCulloch sliced off Simpson's ears and put them in his pocket. The pair used a rope ladder to scale the high wall surrounding Carstairs. Once free, they staged an ambush. Mone lay down on the road, pretending to be injured to flag down a car. When a police vehicle stopped, the officers, PC John Gillies and George Taylor, were attacked. Taylor was killed with an axe, and Gillies was critically injured, but miraculously survived. They hijacked the police car, crashed it in icy conditions, then attacked 2 more civilians who stopped to help. Continuing their rampage, they terrorised a family at a farmhouse, stole another vehicle and fled south. After 3 hours of violence and multiple killings, they were captured near Carlisle when police rammed their car on the A74. By the time their spree had ended, 3 men, Neil McClellan, Ian Simpson and George Taylor, were dead. 2 civilians were badly injured, and Scotland was in shock. The notion that 2 of the country's most dangerous men had managed to escape from what was supposed to be an impenetrable hospital was both terrifying and politically explosive. Mone and McCulloch's trial in early 1977 made legal history. Both men admitted to the murders. Lord Dunpark, presiding at the High Court in Glasgow, handed down Scotland's first natural life sentences, effectively ordering that neither man should ever be released. It was a moment of grim precedent, a reflection of the brutality of their crimes and the public demand for accountability. Mone was transferred from Carstairs to HMP Perth. McCulloch went to HMP Peterhead. Over the following years, Mone repeatedly complained about his conditions. In letters to his father, he described long periods of solitary confinement and threatened legal action through the European Commission of Human Rights. The Mone family name would become further infamous in 1979. Robert's father, Christopher Sonny Mone, committed a triple murder in Dundee. He had reportedly told others that he wanted to be more famous than his son. On December 29, 1978, Sonny murdered 3 women in a Dundee flat on Kinghorn Road. The victims were Jane Simpson, aged 70, a widow, Catherine Miller, aged 29, a newlywed, and Agnes Robertson Walsh, 78, Sonny's half-aunt. Following a drinking session, he tied up, beat and strangled the women, using a stocking to ensure their deaths. The brutality of the attack left the victims bound and severely beaten, and the scene was discovered only after concerned neighbours noticed the absence of the elderly woman. Evidence linking Sonny to the crime included a distinctive ring given to him by his son, Robert, which matched marks on the victims. Sonny was subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment for the triple murders. In 1983, however, he was stabbed to death in HMP Craiginches in Aberdeen. As the decades passed, Mone remained behind bars, but his case, along with McCulloch's, became central to legal debates about human rights, sentencing and parole eligibility in the UK. In 2002, using European human rights legislation, both men successfully challenged their natural life sentences. Their minimum terms were reduced to 30 years, opening the door for parole applications. Mone began using the name James Smith in preparation for possible release. He was moved to lower security prisons, including HMP Glenacle and later HMP Shotts. He took on work as a passman, a trusted inmate job that caused outrage among both other prisoners and the public alike. In 2007, he was allowed on a supervised day trip to Crieff, sparking political backlash and calls for review of parole and release procedures for violent offenders. McCulloch, meanwhile, was eventually transferred to open conditions and in 2013 was released from prison after serving 33 years. His release, though lawful, was widely condemned. Mone remains incarcerated and is one of Scotland's longest-serving prisoners. The Mone and McCulloch cases became a touchstone in Scottish debates over the balance between justice, human rights and public safety. Politicians, victims' families and members of the public expressed anger that men responsible for such atrocities could ever be considered for release. Critics argued that European human rights legislation constrained Scotland's ability to keep its most dangerous offenders incarcerated for life. Supporters of the law countered that human rights standards must apply universally, even to the worst offenders. In 2007, Liz Smith, an MSP for Mid-Scotland and Fife, described Mone's supervised day trip as deeply alarming and called for a review of the legal framework surrounding violent offenders. For the families of the victims, both Nanette Hanson's and those killed in 1976, the controversy reopened old wounds. The brutality of Robert Mone's crimes can overshadow the people whose lives were stolen or scarred by them. It is important to centre those lives here. Nanette Hanson, aged 26, was a teacher, a wife, and expectant mother. Her heroism helped save 12 children. Neil McClellan, aged 46, was a nursing officer at Carstairs, killed whilst doing his job. Ian Simpson, aged 40, was a patient at Carstairs, murdered for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. George Taylor, aged 27, was a police constable who died protecting the public. The 12 schoolgirls who survived the 1967 siege carried the trauma of that day for decades. Some only spoke publicly about their experience 40 years after the fact, united in their insistence that Mone should never be freed. Their stories are not footnotes. They are the heart of the tragedy. Each year on November the 1st, St John's School in Dundee holds a memorial mass for Nanette Hanson. Outside the school, a bouquet is traditionally laid, 12 red roses and 1 white rose, one for each of the girls she saved and one for Nanette herself. Former pupils, now in their 60s, continue to speak of her calm voice and bravery in the face of unimaginable terror. Hanson's Albert Medal citation remains one of the most moving accounts of civilian heroism in modern Scottish history. It reads in part, quote, "Mrs. Hanson persuaded those outside to leave her to handle the situation. This despite the fact that the soldier had already once attempted to shoot her at point-blank range and would have done so had the gun not misfired. This was eventually accomplished through the joint efforts of Mrs. Hanson and the nurse, who were then left alone in the room, with the man trying to persuade him to give himself up. Before he did so, however, he shot Mrs. Hanson in the back, killing her immediately." In Dundee, she is remembered as a symbol of grace and courage in the face of brutality. The case of Robert Mone continues to shape Scottish criminal justice and mental health law, from his 1968 insanity verdict to a 1976 breakout that exposed institutional weaknesses, and a 2002 human rights challenge affecting life sentences and parole. His story underscores the tension between legal frameworks and public outrage. While many cannot accept him ever living freely, the law must still operate within human rights. Mone's life reflects violence, mental illness, and a system struggling to contain both, leaving deep scars on victims, families, and the public. Yet, amid this darkness, the heroism of Nanette Hansen stands out. Her calm, decisive actions saved the lives of 12 girls. Her story is still not told merely as a footnote in a criminal case, but as a testament to bravery, humanity, and the enduring power of selflessness in the face of evil.